3 weeks ago, 238 Venezuelan migrants were flown from Texas to a maximum security prison in El Salvador. That country's president offered to take them, and the Trump administration used a law not invoked since World War II to send them, claiming they are all terrorists and violent gang members. The government has released very little information about the men, but through internal government documents, we've obtained a list of their identities and found that an overwhelming majority have no apparent criminal convictions or even criminal charges. They are now prisoners. Among them, a makeup artist, a soccer player, and a food delivery driver, being held in a place so harsh that El Salvador's justice minister once said the only way out is in a coffin. The shackled men were forced to lower their heads and bodies as they were unloaded from buses and taken to El Salvador's mega prison known as the Terrorism Confinement Center, or SECOT. Andre Hernandez Romero was among them.
Andre is a 31-year-old Venezuelan. He's a makeup artist. He is a gay man. He loves to do theater. He was part of a theater troupe in his hometown.
Lindsay Tozlowski, Andre's attorney, says he does not have a criminal record in the United States or Venezuela. She says he left his home country last year because he was targeted for being gay and for his political views. Last May, Andre made the long trek north through the Darien Gap to Mexico, where he eventually got an appointment to seek asylum in the United States. At a legal border crossing near San Diego, he was taken into custody while his case was processed. Did he have a strong asylum case?
We believe he did have a strong asylum case. He had also done a credible fear interview, which is the very first part of seeking asylum in the United States, and the government had found that his threats against him were credible and that he had a real probability of winning an asylum claim.
But last month, Andre did not appear for a court hearing.
Our client, who was in the middle of seeking asylum, just disappeared. One day he was there, and the next day we're supposed to have court, and he wasn't brought to court.
You used the word disappeared.
Yeah, I use that word because that's what happened.
But Andre did appear in photos taken by Time magazine photographer Philip Holsinger, who was there when the Venezuelans arrived at SECOT. Holsinger told us he heard a young man say, "I'm not a gang member, I'm gay, I'm a stylist." And then he cried for his mother as he was slapped and had his head shaved. By comparing Holsinger's photographs to photos of Andre's tattoos taken by the government, we were able to confirm that this is Andre. His lawyer, who was representing him pro bono, had never seen these photos before.
It's horrifying to see someone who we've met and know as a sweet, funny artist in the most horrible conditions I could imagine.
You fear for Andre's safety in there?
Absolutely. We have grave concerns about whether he can survive.
In October, Tom Homan, who is now the White House border czar, told 60 Minutes the Trump administration's mass deportation plan would start by removing the worst of the worst.
We're going to prioritize those with convictions. We're going to prioritize national security threats. We had to do that. You got to get the worst first.
But are they the worst? The Trump administration has yet to release the identities of the Venezuelan men it sent to El Salvador last month. We obtained internal government documents listing their names and any known criminal information. We cross-referenced that with domestic and international court filings, news reports, and arrest records whenever we could find them. At least 22% of the men on the list have criminal records here in the United States or abroad. The vast majority are for nonviolent offenses like theft, shoplifting, and trespassing. About a dozen are accused of murder, rape, assault, and kidnapping. For 3% of those deported, it is unclear whether a criminal record exists. But we could not find criminal records for 75% of the Venezuelans, 179 men, now sitting in prison. In response to our findings, a Department of Homeland Security spokeswoman said many of those without criminal records, quote, are actually terrorists, human rights abusers, gangsters, and more. They just don't have a rap sheet in the U.S. Border Czar Tom Homan said immigration agents spent hours conducting rigorous checks on each of the men to confirm they are members of Tren de Aragua, a Venezuelan gang President Trump campaigned on eradicating.
To expedite removals of the Tren de Aragua savage gangs, I will invoke the Alien Enemies Act of 1798 to target and dismantle every migrant criminal network operating on American soil.
But in Andri's case, the only evidence the government presented in immigration court were these pictures of his tattoos, crowns, which immigration authorities say can be a symbol of Tren de Aragua.
These are tattoos that not only have a plausible explanation because he is someone who worked in the beauty pageant industry, but also the crowns themselves were on top of the names of his parents. The most plausible explanation for that are that his mom and dad are his king and queen.
Could it be possible that there is something that perhaps the government knows that you don't?
I don't think that that is possible, but if it was possible that they had some information, they should follow the Constitution, present that information, give us the ability to reply to it.
A Department of Homeland Security spokeswoman said on social media that its intelligence assessments go well beyond just gang affiliate tattoos. She said Andri's own social media indicates he is a member of Tren de Aragua. We went back a decade and could only find photos like these. Tattoos and social media were also used to link another Venezuelan migrant, Jersey Reyes Barrios, to the Tren de Aragua gang. Immigration court documents include this Facebook post from 14 years ago, showing him flashing what officers said was a gang sign. His girlfriend told us it was all about rock and roll. Immigration agents also flagged Jersey's crown tattoo as a gang symbol, but they did not mention the crown is above a soccer ball. Jersey was a soccer player in Venezuela. His lawyer says the tattoo honors his favorite team, Real Madrid, whose logo includes a crown. Organized crime analysts told us members of the Salvadoran MS-13 gang can often be identified by signature tattoos, but Tren de Aragua is different. Are tattoos a reliable indicator of membership in Tren de Aragua?
No. Expert after expert tells us tattoos are not a reliable indicator of whether you're part of this particular gang.
Lee Gallant, an attorney for the American Civil Liberties Union, is leading the legal challenge against the Trump administration's efforts to send migrants to Sukot. There are a lot of people who might hear what you're saying and say, these people don't have papers, they should be deported. To that you say what?
If they are here illegally and don't have a right to stay, they can be deported back to their home country. If they've committed crimes, they can be prosecuted and perhaps spend many, many years in a U.S. prison. It's not a matter of can these individuals be punished. It's a matter of how the government is going to go about doing it. Once we start using wartime authority with no oversight, anything is possible. Anybody can be picked up.
Last month, President Trump did what he had promised on the campaign trail. He invoked a 1798 law called the Alien Enemies Act, which allows the president to remove non-citizens without immigration hearings during times of war or invasion.
Every administration back to 1798 has understood this is wartime authority to be used when the United States is at war with a foreign government. The administration is saying, not only are we going to use it against a criminal organization, but you, the courts, have no role. You cannot tell us that we're violating the law or stop us.
Does the U.S. even have the legal right to send someone who's been deported from its country to a foreign prison?
The United States does not have that right. You know, I want to go back to World War II, the last time that any president used this authority. We send people back to their home country. We didn't send them to a foreign prison. Even during World War II, Germans had the right to contest their designation under the Alien Enemies Act. As one of the judges pointed out in the appeals court, Nazis had more process than we're giving to these Venezuelan men.
Before the 3 planes arrived in El Salvador, U.S. District Judge James Boasberg ordered the Trump administration to turn them around. Flight tracking data shows 2 planes were in the air at the time, and one was about to take off from Texas. Instead of turning around, all the planes made a stop at a military base in Honduras. And then, despite Judge Boasberg's verbal and written orders, the planes all flew to El Salvador. Since then, the U.S. government has disclosed very few details about the operation. CBS News published the only list of all 238 deportees.
The government is refusing to answer almost every question from the court.
Based on what grounds?
Well, now they've invoked what's called the state secrets privilege. They are saying they can't even confirm details about the planes.
We asked a Department of Homeland Security spokeswoman what evidence the government has, besides tattoos and social media posts, linking people like Andre and Herce to Tren de Aragua. She cited state secrets and ongoing litigation as the reasons DHS cannot comment on these individual allegations. Homeland Security Secretary Kristi Noem, who visited Secot last month, declined our request for an interview. At the prison, she recorded this video. She was standing in front of a cell packed with Salvadoran gang members, not Venezuelans.
But know that this facility is one of the tools in our toolkit that we will use if you commit crimes against the American people.
The Trump administration is paying El Salvador President Nayib Bukele's government $6 million to house prisoners it sends to Secot. Lawyers and family members of the Venezuelans told us they've had no contact with the men since they arrived. Do you have any idea how long he might be there?
We have no idea.
Alirio Antonio Fuenmayor's younger brother, Alirio Guillermo, was picked up by immigration agents while working as a food delivery driver in Utah. Though he had no criminal record, he was sent to El Salvador last month.
He is an innocent person. He has not committed any crime, and he's in a maximum security prison.
The ACLU's League Alert has spent decades challenging immigration policies of Democratic and Republican administrations. But on the fate of the Venezuelan men, what would you say to these families who are terrified right now about their relatives currently sitting in this prison in El Salvador? Will they ever see them again?
I hope so, but, there's a real danger that they remain there.
You're saying that there are Venezuelans who very well may have no gang ties that are right now in one of the hardest of hardcore prisons in the world that may never get out. They may never see the light of day again.
That's what I'm saying.
On February 1st, President Trump imposed 25% tariffs on nearly all goods imported from Canada. Since then, his administration has engaged in an on-again, off-again trade war with our longtime ally. The tariffs were imposed based on the exaggerated claim that millions of criminals and tons of deadly fentanyl have been pouring over the border into the United States, and that Canada has allowed it to happen. Last month, we went to the northern border to the Chazy River, where even in the middle of winter, migrants continue to cross its frozen banks, often guided by human smugglers who openly advertise their services on Facebook and TikTok. If President Trump and the Canadian government really want to tackle illegal immigration there, they might want to start online. Search for border excursions on TikTok and Facebook, and you'll find a black market set to music that guarantees migrants safe passage across the northern border. There are posts in Spanish, English, and Punjabi.
Hello, Hanji Sashikal Sarano.
And reviews like you'd find on Yelp. These men in the back of a car on their way to a new life in the United States give their smugglers 5 stars and a thumbs up. Stretching more than 5,500 miles, the U.S.-Canadian border is the longest international land border in the world. That's the U.S. on the right and Canada on the left. In February, we traveled to an area the U.S. Customs and Border Protection calls the Swanton Sector, which runs from New Hampshire to upstate New York. Last year, more than 80% of migrant apprehensions at the northern border happened here. The Swanton sector is where this video was recorded in January. A group of men who just crossed the border ran to an SUV that drove them deeper into New York. You'll also see a woman getting out of the car and go north to Canada. This man told us he coordinated the handoff and took the video. Can you tell us who you work for?
For the Sinaloa cartel?
He goes by the name Javi and agreed to speak with us only with his camera off. He said he can't risk his identity being exposed. How does this work? They tell you where to go? They tell you how many people you have to bring across each week?
Exactly. That's how it goes. They provide the people. They have more people who are behind all this, looking for customers, finding them, and summoning them to certain locations.
We found Javi through his online ads, which he says TikTok recently took down. In a conversation with our producer, he did briefly turn his camera on and allowed us to record his masked face. While it's not possible to verify everything Javi told us, he sent these pictures of what he says are his guns as proof of his ties to the Sinaloa cartel. A source in Canadian intelligence told us Javi's story is consistent with the cartel's human and drug smuggling operations. The Sinaloa cartel is one of the largest and most notorious in Mexico. These are videos Javi sent us of his work. He says he's part of a team of 4. Some drive migrants to and from the border and plan logistics, while Javi says he guides people through the woods. The migrants pay about $3,000 each. Javi told us he makes about $1,000 per person. $500 go to the cartel, the rest to the drivers. Some smugglers offer discounts for children. What's the youngest child you've ever crossed?
3 months.
3 meses.
Yes, babies.
What happens if one of the migrants you're working with doesn't pay?
They cannot go. They're held hostage until they pay up.
Until what?
Until they pay.
Do you work only with humans or do you move drugs also?
Everything.
How much fentanyl do you move across that border?
Lately, it's been quiet, but for a while there, we were bringing in 30 kilos per month.
Wow. The drugs come from the China?
From China.
The China.
I get more into the U.S., but also it goes from the U.S. to Canada, and weapons.
A lot of fentanyl comes through.
How many pounds of drugs come across the northern border into the United States is unknown. President Trump claims tremendous amounts of fentanyl pour into the country through Canada. Last year, U.S. Customs and Border Protection seized 43 pounds of fentanyl at the northern border, compared to more than 21,000 pounds confiscated at the U.S.-Mexico border. And while the southern border saw 1.5 million illegal crossings last year, there were fewer than 24,000 illegal crossings from Canada.
See this wood line up here on the left? They come from way over there on the other side of, back side of Canada and walk along the edge of that wood line. And the wood line continues and goes down to the creek, then they would follow the creek.
Sheriff David Favreau oversees Clinton County, New York, which includes about 28 miles of border. Where are the smugglers in all this?
They're hiding. They're the cowards that are just taking the money, not caring about the people that are crossing and what hazards those people might run into. So they're the ones that are just running the business and collecting the cash.
Last year in the Swanton sector, there were more illegal crossings than the previous 17 years combined. More than 19,000 migrants were arrested there. They came from 97 countries, mostly from India and Mexico. And they cross year-round, even through blizzards. In the middle of winter, authorities respond weekly to 911 calls from migrants. In January, 6 Haitians, including a 9-year-old girl, became lost in the woods and some were hospitalized with serious injuries. Last month, this man from Spain suffered severe frostbite. Sheriff Favreau took us down a local road divided by the border. The area is covered by surveillance cameras on both sides. The Royal Canadian Mounted Police saw us and soon after drove by on patrol. When someone is crossing in the dead of winter and there's feet of snow, what are they up against out there?
They're up against a lot. The worst thing that they're up against is the freezing cold, because the temperatures, you're walking through the snow, your pants are getting wet, your boots are going to start soaking through eventually, and they don't even realize they're so desperate and so quick to try and get to where they want to be, that they don't realize frostbite is setting in, and that's one of the biggest dangers.
The case Sheriff Favreau says he'll never forget is the death of Ana Vasquez Flores. Residents of Champlain, New York, erected a memorial in honor of her and her unborn baby. The 33-year-old supermarket worker was 5 months pregnant with her first child when she and her husband flew from Mexico to Montreal in December 2023. They found this Colombian man who advertised on TikTok and hired him to guide Ana across the border. Text messages taken from court documents show they paid him $2,500. Ana's husband asked, "Is it safe?" "Well, look, truth is, the only certain thing in life is death, but we are effective." On the evening of December 11th, Ana began her walk alone through the snow. The alleged smuggler tracked her by GPS on their phones and texted directions. It was dark and the temperature was below freezing. Ana's husband had a visa to work in the United States and was waiting for her in New York. He wrote, "Have you already picked her up?" "She is crossing, friend." "I am very nervous," her husband said. 40 minutes later, the alleged smuggler wrote, "Bro, hello, I think she got wet or turned off her cell phone." Investigators think Ana was following his instructions when she stepped into the icy Chazy River. She was already in America. 3 days later, park rangers and Sheriff Favreau's deputies found Ana's body. The alleged smuggler was arrested at his home in Quebec by the Royal Canadian Mounted Police at the request of the U.S. Justice Department. He was extradited to the United States in February. He pleaded not guilty to smuggling charges and is being held at the Clinton County Jail. Sheriff Favreau says that's the type of coordination that should happen between neighbors.
I find it unusual that up here along the northern border, with all the attention that we've had, I haven't been contacted by anybody at a federal level, really, other than the Border Patrol. We work hand in hand with the Border Patrol.
But you've not heard from Washington, from the White House, from anybody in the president's administration who have been looking intently at your border here?
No.
This 6-time elected sheriff, a Democrat, does credit President Trump's immigration policies for the drop in illegal crossings that he's seen at the northern border. And while Sheriff Favreau welcomes a lull, after 43 years in law enforcement, he says the quiet rarely lasts.
Today, our state of mind is, when is something going to happen? That's the big concern, and that's always in the back of, I think, every law enforcement member's mind. When is something going to occur? When the numbers are down, it gets eerily quiet. We kind of worry about quiet. We like it when things are just steady so that we know what's going on, have a better handle on it.
You don't trust the quiet, that it's going to stick?
We just don't trust that quiet is going to stick.
We didn't ask for this fight, but Canadians are always ready when someone else drops the gloves.
Canada's new Prime Minister, Mark Carney, retaliated with tariffs in response to President Trump's tariffs. But the Canadian government did concede to Trump's complaints about the border and announced a nearly $1 billion plan to strengthen border security by adding more boots on the ground, helicopters, and drones, and appointed a fentanyl czar.
Are tariffs the answer?
The tariffs have disrupted relationships between our two countries, both economically and socially. I mean, I don't see Canada as really being the issue here. Yeah, the border needs to be secured, but there's better ways of doing it than threatening your largest and longest standing partner.
Professor Kelly Sundberg spent 15 years as an officer in the Canadian Border Services Agency and now researches border security at Mount Royal University in Calgary.
We've done a lot of great steps in trying to keep the border open. On the Canadian side, we have fallen short in keeping it secure. We do not have a border patrol such as the United States. We have very few officers. So equivalent to ICE, so your Immigration Customs Enforcement in the United States, which has thousands of officers. For our entire country, we have 400. Clearly, if we're going to address the concerns of President Trump, let alone the concerns of many Canadians also, is we need to increase those numbers.
You'd like to see more?
For the number of cases that we have, I've calculated we probably need around 4,000 to 5,000 officers nationally.
Last month, Canada and the United States, on the same day, declared the Sinaloa cartel a terrorist organization. We spoke to Javi again this week, and he told us the cartel has since had to change the way it moves drugs across the northern border. But the designation has not affected how many people they smuggle into the United States illegally. What has the return of Donald Trump meant for your business?
There's always going to be business. Later on, Donald Trump's time will pass, and this will continue. This is not going to stop.
If they put more Border Patrol officers at the border, if they put more checkpoints, is there anything anyone can do to stop you from moving people across the border?
No.
Nada.
No, nada.
There's always a way. The border between Canada and the U.S. is much bigger than the one with Mexico. You can always get in.
You'll find another way.
Siempre.
Always.
With 9 days until Election Day, former President Trump has stepped up his attacks on the Biden-Harris administration's record on illegal immigration and pledged that if elected, he'll conduct the largest deportation in American history. There are more than 11 million undocumented immigrants living in the United States, about 3% of the population. Nearly 80% of them have lived in the country for a decade or more. How realistic is this mass deportation campaign promise? What would be the human and financial cost? We took these questions to one of the people Donald Trump has said would join him if he wins a second term, Tom Homan, who led immigration enforcement during the first Trump administration when thousands of migrant children were separated from their parents at the border.
I hear a lot of people say, the talk of a mass deportation is racist, it's threatening to the immigrant community. It's not threatening to the immigrant community. It should be threatening to the illegal immigrant community. But on the heels of historic illegal immigration crisis, that has to be done. How you doing?
At the Republican National Convention this summer, Tom Homan was the proud pitchman of mass deportation.
I got a message to the millions of illegal aliens that Joe Biden's releasing our country. You better start packing now.
Over 3 decades, he worked his way up from border patrolman to acting director of Immigration and Customs Enforcement, the agency known as ICE, during the first year and a half of the Trump administration. This election cycle, former President Trump has mentioned mass deportation at nearly every rally.
We will begin the largest deportation operation in the history of our country because we have no choice.
What would the largest deportation in American history look like to you?
Well, let me tell you what's not going to be first. It's not going to be a mass sweep of neighborhoods. It's not going to be building concentration camps. I've read it all. It's ridiculous.
But if mass deportation is not going to be, as you said, massive sweeps and concentration camps,
There'll be concentrated,
what is it?
There'll be targeted arrest. We'll know who we're going to arrest, where we're most likely to find them based on numerous investigative processes.
Here's our message.
Former President Trump's running mate J.D. Vance said it would be reasonable to deport 1 million people a year. Trump's top immigration advisor, Stephen Miller, told a conservative audience that deportees would be removed from the country in a massive military air operation.
So you grab illegal immigrants and then you move them to the staging grounds, and that's where the planes are waiting for federal law enforcement to then move those illegals home. You deputize the National Guard to carry out immigration enforcement.
Stephen Miller said that this will involve large-scale raids.
I don't use the term raids, but you're probably talking about worksite enforcement operations, which this administration pretty much stopped.
Workplace enforcement, that's a roundup.
And that's going to be necessary. Worksite enforcement operations just not about people who's working illegally in the country and companies that hire them that's going to undercut their competition that has U.S. citizen employees. It's where we find a lot of trafficking cases, women and children who are forced into forced labor to pay off their smuggling fees.
A study by the American Immigration Council found that mass deportation could result in the removal of millions of construction, hospitality, and agriculture workers, reducing the GDP by $1.7 trillion. Can you just limit it to criminals and national security threat, though?
If I'm in charge of this, my priorities are public safety threats and national security threats first.
First implies others follow, though, right?
Absolutely.
So game that out for me. What's the scenario?
It's not okay to enter a country illegally, which is a crime. That's what drives illegal immigration. When there's no consequences, the Biden-Harris administration has proven this. You can get to the border, turn yourselves in, get released within 24 hours.
So you are carrying out a targeted enforcement operation. Grandma's in the house. She's undocumented. She get arrested too?
It depends.
Which?
Let the judge decide. We're going to remove people that a judge has already deported.
Homan's suggestion that grandma might face arrest would mark a major shift in policy. Under President Biden, ICE is mostly targeting those deemed national security or public safety threats and people who just crossed the border illegally. The majority of the 4 million deportations carried out by the Biden administration have occurred at the southern border, where an unprecedented influx of migrants created scenes of chaos, a humanitarian crisis, and one of Vice President Harris's biggest political vulnerabilities. Homan says mass deportation is the solution.
How many people would be deported?
You can't answer that question.
Why not?
How many officers do I have?
Is there a written plan on this?
Not that I know of.
If there's no memo, if there's no plan, is this fully baked?
We've done it before.
But not a deportation of this scale.
ICE is very good at these operations. This is what they do.
To see what they do, we went to Silver Spring, Maryland, a suburb of Washington, D.C., where earlier this month, ICE agents gathered in a parking lot before dawn. It's what ICE does every day and has been doing for many years.
All right, good morning, everyone.
Their task this morning, locate and arrest undocumented immigrants with criminal histories, including assault, robbery, drug and gun convictions.
This morning, our target is going to be
identified by ICE as a threat to public safety.
Hey, let's roll.
Matt Elliston, director of ICE's Baltimore field office, told us the goal was to catch the first target by surprise.
You've been watching him.
Yeah.
You know his routine.
Yeah, we know his routine. We've been watching him for a couple days.
Wait till he gets about in front of my vehicle.
Sure enough, a white van soon appeared to pick him up, but they didn't get very far.
Hey, how you doing? What you got in your hand? What did you put down?
The man they arrested was a 24-year-old Guatemalan with an assault conviction who had been ordered deported by a judge 5 years ago. The ICE agents discovered that the driver of the van was also in the country illegally. They told us he'd been deported once before.
He has no criminal record, and he was picking up his employee to go to work. It doesn't make sense to waste a detention bed on someone like that when we have other felons to go out and get today.
A lot of folks might hear you and say, like, hold on, you've got an undocumented immigrant who comes face to face with ICE, who's responsible for deporting folks from this country, and you let him go.
We utilize immigration law to enhance public safety. It's not to just aimlessly arrest anyone we come across, right? We do targeted enforcement in ICE.
It took a team of more than a dozen officers 7 hours to arrest 6 people, and that doesn't include the many hours spent searching for them.
Oh, my God.
So how would it even be possible then for ICE to arrest 1 million people in this country if that mass deportation plan were to take effect?
I could say here in Maryland, we would never be able to resource or find that amount of detention, which would be our biggest challenge, right? And just the amount of money that would cost in order to detain everybody, it would be, at the Department of Defense level of financing.
It's insane to think about it at this sort of scale.
Jason Hauser, ICE chief of staff during the first 2 years of the Biden administration,
Yep, go ahead and take it off for me.
says it costs $150 a night to detain people like those we saw arrested. The average stay as they await deportation is 46 days. One deportation flight can cost $250,000, and that assumes the home country will accept them. Many, like Cuba and Venezuela, rarely do.
ICE currently has some 6,000 law enforcement agents. How much manpower would it take to arrest and deport 1 million people?
You're talking 100,000 official officers, police officers, detention officers, support staff, management staff.
Trump advisor Stephen Miller has said staff could come from other government agencies like the DEA.
The idea that you're going to take the FBI or the Marshal Service or the Bureau of Prisons or the Secret Service or FEMA off of their mission sets that protect our communities will not make us safer.
Immigration enforcement requires specialized training and language skills that most military and law enforcement officers don't have.
There's this discussion out there that makes it sound like it's just an easy swap.
It is not an easy swap. So what I can tell you from the Immigration and Nationality Act, immigration law is second to the U.S. tax code in complexity.
We have seen one estimate that says it would cost $88 billion to deport 1 million people a year.
I don't know if that's accurate or not.
Is that what American taxpayers should expect?
What price do you put on national security? Is it worth it?
Is there a way to carry out mass deportation without separating families?
Of course there is. Families can be deported together.
Monica Camacho Perez and her family worry about that. They have lived and worked in the country since coming illegally from Mexico more than 20 years ago.
What scares you the most?
I think of my nieces and my nephews, that they're going to get separated from their parents.
¿Y estaba feliz o no? ¿Te parece triste?
They made a life in Baltimore, where Monica, who's 30, teaches English as a second language.
We are a normal family like anybody else. Right? We go to church, we work every day, we pay taxes.
She's among the more than 500,000 undocumented immigrants brought to the country as children who are protected from deportation under the Deferred Action for Childhood Arrivals program known as DACA.
I'm the only one right now that's protected while my parents are not, my brothers are not. My brothers have children that are born here. So if they were to get deported, what will happen to their kids? Although I have my life here, I think that I would take the decision to go back with my parents to take care of them.
You would?
Yes.
You own a home here. This is the city you grew up in.
But they're also part of my American dream. And I can't imagine living here without them.
Like Monica's nieces and nephews, more than 4 million U.S.-born children live with an undocumented parent.
Why should a child who is an American citizen have to pack up and move to a country that they don't know?
Because their parent absolutely entered the country illegally, had a child knowing he was in the country illegally, so he created that crisis.
While Homan ran ICE in what became one of the most controversial policies of the Trump administration, at least 5,000 migrant children were forcibly separated from their parents who were prosecuted for crossing the border illegally.
You've been called the father of Trump's family separation policy. How does that sit with you?
It's not true. I didn't write the memorandum to separate families. I signed the memo. Why did I sign the memo? I was hoping to save lives. While you and I are talking right now, a child's going to die on the border. So we thought maybe if we prosecute people, they'll stop coming.
And if Trump wins a second term?
I don't know of any formal policy, but they're talking about family separation.
Should it be on the table?
It needs to be considered, absolutely.
Do you think a mass deportation plan would deter other people from coming to this country illegally?
No, I don't think so. Regardless, people are still going to try to come for a better life.
There's no denying immigration has become one of the most important and contentious issues in this presidential election year. And there's no better example of that than the high-stakes fight between the state of Texas and the Biden administration. 3 years ago, Texas's Republican Governor Greg Abbott launched Operation Lone Star, deploying thousands of police and soldiers and miles of barriers to deter record numbers of illegal crossings. The Supreme Court has repeatedly ruled that immigration is the job of the federal government. But as we first reported earlier this year, rarely has a state so aggressively challenged that authority. In January, Governor Abbott ordered his state National Guard to block the federal government's Border Patrol from Shelby Park, a dusty stretch of border along the Rio Grande in Eagle Pass, Texas. To understand why, you need to see what happened there in December.
We were on the banks of the river before dawn with soldiers from the Texas National Guard. We heard the cries of people before we could see their faces. It wasn't until we moved closer that we realized how many people had just crossed from Mexico.
It's illegal. It's illegal.
The soldiers told them it was dangerous to cross here. Help us, they begged. Some of the women cried, "We have children." We heard groans and found this young man twisting in the wire. He kept going. Stay calm, they told each other as families pushed their children through. Nearly everyone we saw made it across and into the United States. Thousands of people a day crossed here in late December, a record for this section of the Texas border. There were so many people, the U.S. Border Patrol had to transform Shelby Park into an open-air holding center. Weeks later, once the surge died down, Governor Abbott ordered his Texas National Guard to block the federal government's Border Patrol from entering the park without permission. Governor Abbott argued the federal government had failed to fulfill its obligation to the states. And in that, some heard echoes of Texas's history of rebellion and threats of secession.
I can't believe, Governor, I'm going to ask you this question, but I'm going to ask you, do you believe that Texas has the right to secede? Is that what we're talking about here?
Those are false narratives. What Texas and the United States have the right to do, and that's to enforce the law.
You heard the argument against what you're doing out here. Each state can't control its own border policy. You're looking at a completely chaotic system. That's the job of the federal government.
We're not imposing a Texas border policy. Texas very simply is enforcing the laws that are the policy of the United States Congress.
What gives you the authority to tell the U.S. Border Patrol what to do?
For one, as governor of the state of Texas, I have the authority to control ingress and egress to any land in the state of Texas. For another, this land we're on right now was used by the federal government to further illegal activity, and I wanted to put a stop to it.
We went behind the guarded gates of Shelby Park in January, shortly after Governor Abbott had taken control.
So this is called an anti-climb barriers.
Texas Department of Public Safety Lieutenant Christopher Olivares showed us where state National Guardsmen were installing fresh razor wire barriers along the river.
Help me understand at the heart of this why Texas has a problem with the Border Patrol coming in to process migrants in this park.
The issue is trying to prevent another influx, because when Border Patrol is here setting up a processing center, it's going to encourage more migrants to cross the river because they know where to go.
It's one of many spots along the Texas border where coils of sharp wire have been going up ever since Governor Abbott launched Operation Lone Star in 2021. Since then, thousands of migrants have been arrested and detained on trespassing charges.
Hey, stop!
State troopers have cracked down on human smuggling rings. And the state has spent more than $150 million sending migrants on buses to cities like New York and Chicago, turning the trouble at the border into a political and financial headache for Democratic mayors. Once the site of ball games and flea markets, Shelby Park is now Governor Abbott's model of what the Texas border can be.
Where we are right now, there used to be 3,000 or 4,000 people crossing illegally a day. For the past 3 days, there's an average of just 3 people crossing the border illegally.
You don't just plant a flag just to plant a flag. It's got to be strategic and it's got to make sense.
Raul Ortiz served as chief of the U.S. Border Patrol under President Biden and deputy chief under President Trump. He retired last year.
When agencies are making a decision based upon politics or whether they're going to get media coverage, hey, we're going to put all our personnel in this 2-mile stretch. What about the other 200 miles?
In our interview, Ortiz criticized Governor Abbott for not cooperating with the Border Patrol and playing politics with immigration. but he also expressed frustration with President Biden.
I've never had one conversation with the president or the vice president for that matter. And so I was the chief of the Border Patrol. I commanded 21,000 people. That's a problem.
I just saw 50 people today who had just crossed the border illegally. So something's not working.
We need to make sure that Central America, South America, Mexico, that those regions understand that if you pay a smuggler and you cross in between the ports of entry and you do not have a legitimate claim to some sort of asylum benefit, you're going to be sent back.
Do you believe that the White House has sent mixed messages to migrants?
Yeah, most definitely.
We spoke with Ortiz in an area just 4 miles south of Shelby Park. The ground was littered with wet clothes that migrants had changed out of and left behind after crossing the river.
Does all of this tell you that people are still crossing this river right here?
Oh yeah, the guides or the smugglers will bring the migrants over. This is all very calculated by the cartels that control these areas on the Mexican side.
About 7 miles north of Shelby Park, we came upon this group of migrants who had just crossed the Rio Grande and were being picked up by the Border Patrol.
¿Y tiene familia aquí en los Estados Unidos? Sí, tengo un hermano.
This mother and her 2 sons took buses from El Salvador. She told us the soldiers on the U.S. side of the border weren't much of a deterrent. She feared the cartels in Mexico more. Sometimes they kidnap you and expect payment, she said.
The reality is people are still going to find a way to get in no matter how much manpower you have out here, no matter how much wire you put up.
Disagree completely.
You do?
Yeah, because in Texas, anyway, we're going to be barricading every area where people are crossing until we get every area to have like this area is right now.
Texas is going to barricade every area? What do you mean?
Every area where the cartels use as a crossing, we intend to be barricading.
The border's going to look like a war zone.
It is a war zone.
Over the past 3 years, the Biden administration has carried out over 4 million expulsions and deportations, more than the Trump administration. But it has also allowed over 3 million people to remain in the country for years while their immigration cases are heard. And the Border Patrol estimates another 1.6 million people have entered the country illegally without getting caught. In February, former President Trump visited Shelby Park with Governor Abbott. On the same day, President Biden was also at the Texas border in Brownsville.
Instead of playing politics with the issue, why don't we just get together and get it done?
President Biden says that if Republicans were serious about securing the border, they would not have rejected a bipartisan immigration deal in the Senate in February after former President Trump opposed it. That deal would have increased funding for the Border Patrol and required the president to expel all migrants crossing illegally during surges like the one at Shelby Park in December. The latest battle between Texas and Washington concerns a new law Governor Abbott signed authorizing Texas's more than 2,700 law enforcement agencies to arrest migrants for illegally crossing the border. Texas judges could then order migrants to return to Mexico or serve time, bypassing the federal immigration system entirely. Critics of the law say it is so broadly written, it fails to define when authorities can stop someone.
Tell me more about
We asked Lieutenant Olivares of the Texas Department of Public Safety, or DPS, about the concern that immigrants and people of color could be subjected to racial profiling.
I can tell you that our troopers are not going to be stopping cars and checking for immigration status. They're not.
But this law is not just written for DPS.
Right. It's a Texas law.
The reality is this is going to be carried out far from the border.
Right. Absolutely.
So couldn't you get caught up in it? You're Latino. Couldn't I get caught up in it?
That's not the case. They have to develop probable cause in order to stop a car. You can't just go interview every single person in that car, ask them for immigration status. But of course, yeah, there could be some issues where maybe some other agency outside of a border area could take that into account.
And it's probable. Does that make you nervous?
It's probable because there's a lot of agencies here in Texas that operate, right? But I would think that every chief at a police agency would have to implement some type of policy and procedure to actually enforce this new law.
In February, a federal judge stopped the new law from taking effect. An appeals court is now considering the case. The Department of Justice and the American Civil Liberties Union are suing Texas, arguing the law interferes with the federal government's authority over immigration. But Governor Abbott argues Texas is being invaded and has the right to defend itself. That idea has resonated with militias and groups opposed to illegal immigration. Some joined a convoy in February and descended on the Eagle Pass area.
Everyone, I think, agrees that the immigration system right now is completely broken, and there's a lot of blame to go around. But do you really, truly believe that invasion is the right word to be using here?
Invasion is the word that's used in the United States Constitution. Invasion or imminent danger. I use them both. And we are in imminent danger because of what the drug cartels do every single day, because of the known and unknown terrorists who cross every single day.
So the convoys and militia have heard the language, and they've started to come to the point that migrants have had to be relocated from some locations for their own safety. Are you not concerned about violence happening because of language like the word invasion?
There's no language that would spur violence, but I'll be clear about this. We don't want violence of any type.
How does this end?
Oh, it ends very simply, and that's with a president of the United States who will actually fulfill his oath of office and enforce the laws of the United States of America, and that means denying illegal entry into our country.
Do you want to be Trump's running mate?
No.
What if he asks you?
Listen, I love being governor of Texas. I can best aid him in my role by being a great governor of Texas.
So far, the governor has committed more than $11 billion to Operation Lone Star. Over the last 3 years, the percentage of people entering Texas illegally has dropped while rising in other border states. Abbott's critics say that has more to do with other factors like crackdowns on migration in parts of Mexico. There are still more than 1 million illegal border crossings in Texas every year. There are also at least a dozen lawsuits being fought between Texas and the federal government over immigration issues. All that infighting worries former Border Patrol Chief Raul Ortiz.
The National Guardsmen, even to some degree the Border Patrol agents, have become pawns in this political game between the two sides.
Who's winning?
The cartels, the criminal organizations, that's who's winning in all of this. They're sitting back, reaping all the benefits while they watch the state of Texas and Washington, D.C. go at it.
The number of migrants arriving at the southern border is unprecedented. Last year, U.S. Customs and Border Protection recorded 2.5 million instances of detaining or turning away people attempting to cross into the United States from Mexico. So what's the fastest growing group among them? Chinese migrants. Yes, you heard that right, Chinese. We saw large groups, including many from the middle class, come through a 4-foot gap at the end of a border fence 60 miles east of San Diego. The illegal entryway is a new route for those hoping to live in America.
Just after sunrise, we saw the first group of migrants make their way from Mexico through a gap between the 30-foot steel border fence and rocks, ducking under a bit of razor wire and into the United States. We were surprised to see the number of people coming through from China, nearly 7,000 miles away.
Careful, watch.
Our cameras, and at one point, this armed Border Patrol agent standing 25 feet away, did not deter them.
So, how old are you?
I'm 20 years old.
This man, a college graduate, told us he hoped to find work in Los Angeles. He said his trip from China took 40 days.
What countries did you go through?
Thailand, Morocco, Ecuador, Colombia, Panama, Costa Rica, Nicaragua.
Jeez.
30 minutes later, a smuggler's SUV raced along the border fence and dropped another group at the same spot. And 30 minutes after that, another group. Over 4 days, we witnessed nearly 600 migrants, adults and children, pass through this hole and onto U.S. soil unchecked. We saw people from India, Vietnam, and Afghanistan. Many of the Chinese migrants who came through will end up asking for political asylum. Did you travel by yourself or with family or friends?
No, just me.
Just you.
Yeah.
The Gap is a global destination, littered with travel documents from around the world. With the help of a translator, we learned a little about the Chinese migrants coming through.
Teaching? You were a teacher? Yeah. Oh, my goodness.
We also met a banker and small business owners. Some of the migrants made a grueling journey through Central America with dusty backpacks. But we noticed middle-class migrants from China arriving with rolling bags. They told us they took flights all the way to Mexico. Some flew from China to Ecuador because it doesn't require a visa for Chinese nationals, then took flights to Tijuana, Mexico. The migrants told us they connected with smugglers, or what they call snakeheads, in Tijuana. And they each paid them about $400 for the hour-long drive that ended here at the Gap.
Why did you decide to come to the United States?
为什么要离开中国？为什么要来美国？
在那边不好过，在家里面不好过。
Oh, it's hard to live there.
找工作很难找，现在。
Hard to find jobs.
What did you do? Did you work in China?
以前是在厂里面上班，现在厂里面都不好
Work in the
做。
factory, but now it's hard to work in the factory.
Was this a trip expensive?
这次来会花很多钱啊。对啊。
She said it was, and that she sold her house to cover the $14,000 cost of her trip to the U.S. Last year, U.S. Customs and Border Protection reported 37,000 Chinese citizens were apprehended crossing illegally from Mexico into the U.S. That's 50 times more than 2 years earlier. Many of the migrants told us they made the journey to escape China's increasingly repressive political climate and sluggish economy. This 37-year-old woman said China's COVID lockdown destroyed her childcare business. She left her 2 young children with family at home.
And why did you decide to come to the United States?
为什么要决定要来美国？
因为很多原因嘛。
Many reasons.
For work or?
是为了工作呢，还是为了什么
不完全是为了工作。
？Not entirely.
Okay, what reasons?
是其他原因呢？
想说啥就说啥吗？
可以。
自由啊。
Freedom.
We wondered how all of these migrants knew about this particular entryway into California. The answer was in their hands.
How do you know about that? Oh, Douyin. Okay, TikTok.
Oh, you learned on TikTok. Yeah.
TikTok is a social media platform created in China. The post we found had step-by-step instructions for hiring smugglers and detailed directions to that hole we visited. We were struck by just how orderly and routine it all seemed. The migrants walked about a half-mile down a dirt road and waited in line for U.S. Border Patrol to arrive so they could surrender.
How much property do you have here?
The land they're waiting on is owned by 75-year-old Jerry Schuster, a retiree.
The whole world seems to know there's a way in and it's on your property.
They're all doing this. When they come over here, they come with the suitcases. They come prepared with the computers just like they got off on a Norwegian cruise ship yesterday.
Schuster owns 17 acres just north of the border fence and a quarter-mile outside of Yacumba Hot Springs, California. Population 540.
You're an immigrant yourself.
Yes.
Where did you come from?
I come from Yugoslavia, and I left Yugoslavia. I went to Austria. I stayed there 8 months, and I knocked on this door. I didn't bust the door down to come over here.
You came through the front door?
I came through the front door.
And what do you think about this?
They don't care. They come through their whole, like they come into their own country over here, and nobody do nothing about it.
Schuster says it all started in May. He went to investigate some smoke coming from his property and found migrants burning trees to stay warm. Today, his property looks like a messy moonscape, littered with the trash and tents migrants have left behind.
Have you ever just yelled, "Get out of here"?
Well, they say that was like 4 months ago. There was 8 guys start knocking my trees and start burning my trees on the other side. So I told them, please don't do that. Please don't. They start surrounding me. I went home and I got my gun and I shoot in the air. They arrest me.
They arrested you?
Yeah, they arrested me.
On your property?
Yeah, on my property. Yeah, just because I asked them not to burn the trees, not to knock the fences, and they arrest me. They put me in a police car and just protecting my own land.
Yeah. Schuster wasn't charged, but his gun was confiscated.
If you had to guess, how many migrants do you think you've seen come through here?
Maybe 3,000 a week.
3,000 a week?
I would say that, yes. Because this is an ongoing deal.
About 2 hours after these migrants arrived, we saw the Border Patrol pull up, broadcasting recorded instructions in Mandarin. The migrants were driven to a detention facility near San Diego, where they are given background checks. Some are interviewed. Typically, within 72 hours, they are released into the United States and can begin the process of filing an asylum claim. Jacqueline Ariano has volunteered on the border for 8 years, offering humanitarian aid to migrants.
So I'm a native Spanish speaker. I have been able to rely on being bilingual in doing this work for the duration that I have been doing it. And in this past year, I mean, there's been times that I've come to the sites and not spoken to a single Spanish speaker.
She relies on translation apps to communicate with Chinese migrants.
These people want to be picked up by Border Patrol. Why isn't this happening at a port of entry?
That would definitely be the ideal situation, and people would much prefer to do so. It would definitely be much safer and more efficient. Unfortunately, there are barriers to people being able to seek asylum at a port of entry.
One barrier is the phone app called CBP-1. Asylum seekers are supposed to use the app to make an appointment to enter the U.S. through a legal border crossing. As we saw last spring in Juarez, Mexico, the system is glitchy.
Oh, yeah, and it gets stuck, right?
One opportunity at 9 o'clock, no more.
Volunteers who work with migrants told us there's still a 3 to 4 month wait to secure an appointment at a border crossing.
So is this a shortcut?
It's really like the only one that they have. I don't even know that they would consider it a shortcut.
For years, millions of Chinese entered the U.S. with a visa that allowed them to visit, work, or study. But in the last few years, those visas have been increasingly difficult to secure as tensions between the two countries have grown. In 2016, the U.S. granted 2.2 million temporary visas to Chinese nationals. In 2022, it was just 160,000.
So a lot of these folks may have come on.
Tammy Lin is an immigration attorney and has worked with clients from China for nearly 2 decades.
If someone's not granted asylum here, will China then say, okay, yes, we'll take them back?
I haven't seen that happen, really. I think even back to 2008, a lot of the Chinese nationals that had failed asylum cases weren't able to get passports to be put on the plane to be sent back. So we can't send you back.
Based on our review of data from Immigration and Customs Enforcement, there are at least 36,000 Chinese who have been ordered by U.S. courts to leave the country. But China is notorious for not taking back its citizens, and the U.S. can't force China to accept them.
So then what happens if they have a failed claim but they can't go back to China?
That's a very good question. They're stuck in this limbo.
According to the Department of Justice, last year, 55% of Chinese migrants were granted asylum, compared to 14% for every other nationality. With the odds in their favor and a phone to guide them, there's little to discourage more Chinese migrants from coming through the gap near Jerry Schuster's place.
Have you said to anybody, hey, there's this giant hole, they're coming through, how about patching that up?
They know that thing is there. And we all been telling them, hey, when this thing gonna quit over here? You gotta call Washington, D.C., that's what they say.
So we did. U.S. Customs and Border Protection told us their agents don't have authority to stop people from coming through gaps like this one and can only arrest them after they've entered illegally. As for closing that gap, they said it is on their priority list, but would require money from Congress.